All righty. Welcome to the Friday Daily Market Wrap. Today is Friday, March 6th, 2026. This is the biggest charts in 30 minutes. My name is David Zimmerman. I'm the founder of DeFi University, and we're going to run through some charts this evening. All right. Let's start things off with BTC. Always a good idea to start things off with the king. And let me just go ahead. Let's jump right in, as Ben Cowan likes to say. Okie dokie, here we go. So you're going to notice the same type of patterns playing out on all of these charts. It really doesn't matter which digital asset you look at. I'd say, 99 out of 100 of them are exhibiting a very similar bear flag. We've basically been flagging off on the way down since the slightly lower high that we put in at the end of October. So this is a flag. This is a flag. I expect that we'll be at 48,000 soon on BTC. Even if there is one more little push higher at some point in the month of March, if there is, I'm doubtful of whether it can get above 74K. But even if there is, that would just be another selling opportunity. Look, this is a Bitcoin bear market. And so that means rallies are for selling. Why don't we go ahead and take a look at total? Let's take a look at these. Let's see if there are any interesting patterns here. There should be. So I think something that you're going to see more and more of, now this is just total crypto market cap, but something that you're going to see more and more of over the next, couple of months this year really is alts, specifically alts. So if we take a look at like total two, I think that we're going to see alts retest their lows from last bear cycle. So let me just go ahead and draw in that trend line so that we can see, a little bit of see that breakdown? There's the false breakdown, there's the anchor, and there's the real breakdown, putting in a beautiful flag. This is a textbook bear flag here, just painting a flag perfectly. My expectation here is that we see, at least a retest of the top of the channel from last bear market on total. But what I would really expect is if we switch on over here to total three, my expectation out of total three is alt Mageddon. So I expect there to be some real, true chaos in altcoin land. And if we just go ahead and grab an arrow tool, we can take a look at this a little bit further. You know what, we don't need to mark the all-time highs, not really, just remove that. And then this level of support, I'm going to go ahead and remove that also. I just want this marked right there. So that's the top of that's the top of the channel from the last bear market. So those mark the highs from the last bear. This horizontal marks the low from the last bear. And so my expectation for every altcoin, 99 out of 100 altcoins, my expectation is over the next 6 months for them to be down an average of 60%. So, that would take alts all the way down to their bear market lows from last cycle. So that is my expectation over here, is that we see some real carnage in alts. And I think that it needs to be led to the downside by BTC. So this flag, we're just taking a look at total. This is total market cap. This flag, I expect this flag to complete, bringing BTC, another 20% lower or so. If we just take a look at BTC USD here, let's just take a look. So my expectation is over the next 6 weeks for BTC to be down another at least 20%, probably closer to 25%. And I expect it to get down to like 49K. That's my expectation. So if that is the frame, well, then why don't we take a look at Ethereum? Let's take a look at ETH. And I mean, ETH is in a precarious place because if Bitcoin is down 30%, well, then ETH would likely break $1,600 and move all the way down to like maybe $1,200, something like that, before basing down here above like $1,000, something like that. So yeah, this does not look good for Ethereum. ETH looks like it is on the brink of a sharp move lower here. I'm maintaining my ETH shorts. I'm also short BTC. So let's take a look at Solana. Now, you know, some of the content that the people over at Solana put out on the internet is really horrible. Like, kind of, sort of. It's not quite as bad as the XRP shit, but it can be pretty bad. Like the way that they like to hype stuff. Like, I just can't stand it. Don't like it at all. Now, I know that there are a lot of teams building on Solana, and that is great. I just don't like the hype on the vapor. Okay. Like, most of the projects that I've seen, eh, like they need to actually make money and return that to token holders. And Solana itself is pretty inflationary. And when you stake it, you get like what, a 7% staking yield? But isn't the inflation rate like 7% or maybe a little bit greater than that? So how are you actually supposed to make money with this? And this pattern is a bear flag. This is a bear flag. We just see this playing out over and over and over again. And also notice the $95 level. When Solana broke down below that level, it acted as resistance on the retest, and Sol was rejected. So basically, what I'm looking at here for Sol is that this is just another altcoin. And so I expect that it will be down a further 50 or 60% from here over the course of the rest of this year. That's my expectation. And so I'm short Sol, and I'm expressing my market bias by being short with no leverage. That's the way that I choose to trade this. I don't think that I need any leverage if I expect a 60% move. I can simply get short and sit. And as long as funding is positive or slightly negative, but direction moves in my favor, I'm good. And I can sit for months. So my expectation here out of Sol is that over the next several months, it's moves the downside by at least an additional 60%. And I think that $30 is a reasonable area to start buying Sol, but not before. So my expectation here is $30 Sol, maybe by the end of April, something like that. But I would love the opportunity to buy Sol at the lows from last bear cycle. And I think that for many alts, and in fact, some alts that we're going to take a look at tonight, right now, you can actually pick them up for below their bear market lows last bear market. Now, what does that tell you? Well, that it's definitely premature to be buying those alts. Just because they're down 95% from a high this past bull does not mean they can't be down another 70% from here. So, just because something is down 90% doesn't mean it can't be down a further 90%. Like, these things can go to, sub penny value, valuations for per token. So really got to be careful because these things can collapse. I am short Sol, and I might start buying back the shorts at $30. Okay, let's move on. Crude oil. Got to just touch on crude real quick because this is going to be what everyone's going to be talking about next week and probably for the foreseeable future. So crude oil breaking out above this resistance at $78, breaking out above trend line resistance here. We can go ahead and remove both of those levels. And now we've got some resistance above at $95 and support down below at $55. Now, I would love an opportunity to sell this next week. If I get the opportunity to sell crude oil, I would do it on Ostium next week. If I get an opportunity to sell it near these levels from the start of the Ukraine war up here at like 100, 110, 120, I would absolutely nibble on the short side up above $100. So if crude is able to get up above $100, I would love to be able to just sell it. Short position, don't pay much in funding. If you're short over on Ostium, I think it's like 2% is the funding rate right now for shorts to hold the short position. And you know what? I would use zero leverage and I would play it back down to 55 because once this conflict resolves, well, then the floodgates for crude are going to open up. So if I can open up a short up here at 100 and just write it down to the lows at 55 and use no leverage or maybe like 1.1x leverage, well, hey, all of a sudden I could capture like 50 or 60%. So not bad. And I think that that's a really decent trade that's shaping up, but I'm just waiting. First of all, I want to see a breakout above 95. Like that is really the level of resistance that crude is, up against now or moving up towards right now. So $95, break $95, and then, hey, you know what? I'm going to start selling. So break $95, and I'll start nibbling on the short side, at first with zero leverage. But if it gets up above 110 or 120, then I'll start using like 1.1x leverage, or maybe 1.2, like at a maximum 1.2, maybe 1.15. Okay. Like 1.2 is a little bit too much. But so this up here, 120, I would love to sell crude up there. My expectation is that throughout the rest of the year, leading into the midterms, this upcoming November, that crude oil prices will decline precipitously, even if they don't get up above $100. I think that crude is a sell up above 100 for sure. Okay, so let's take a look at volatility a little bit. Big day, and importantly, vol, and this is volatility futures. Vol closed at its highs, so closed at the highs of the week and near 27. So this is, we might be looking for some type of a sell-off to start the week next week out of equities. Maybe we'll see what the futures open looking like on Sunday, but we definitely see the S&P, having rolled over here. This looks like distribution at a market top to me. So the level of support is $6,200 or 6,200 on the S&P, excuse me. And for the NASDAQ, the level of support and, very similar type of distribution, similar to what we got the same time last year. And here was that first leg down and the flag. Here's that first leg down and the flag. And we're just waiting for that sharp move lower, which would likely take, the NASDAQ down to 22,400. That is the level of support, the first level of support on the downside. Now let's go ahead and zoom out. Let's zoom out here to a weekly. And let's use some moving averages to see where we could see some, further support on the downside for the NASDAQ, since, volatility closed at its highs this week and nearly at 30. So I think, did the VIX hit 30? 2950, closed at 2950. Wow. So yeah, we're going to get some vol to start the week next week. Let me go ahead and throw down that 200 week. The 200 week moving average is much, much lower. So probably not in play. How about the 50? Hey, the 50 is definitely in play, but I think that we probably see lower levels. Maybe the 100. So the 100 was broken briefly during the tariff tantrum sell-off last April. Looks like we might come down and test that 100-week moving average. So getting short the NASDAQ over the weekend on Ostium, or maybe on the open on Sunday on Ostium, that looks like a decent trade too. Just short NASDAQ futures on Ostium. I like that. It looks good. That looks good. And so what would we be playing for? Just wait for the open on Sunday and play for a 10% move to the downside. That would make it a 16% correction from the all-time highs. That is a normal run-of-the-mill correction. And, it's about time too, because that would provide an amazing buying opportunity down here for anyone who's patient, especially for some of those software stocks where their businesses still generate a ton of free cash flow, but their stocks have just been sold along with everything else software. So if we take a look maybe now at IGV, this is, the software ETF, and look at that bounce. So, the fact that this bounce continued tells me that, maybe there's some upside left for Bitcoin. Bitcoin has really been underperforming just about everything. And so let's just take a look at this. Let me throw Bitcoin over top of this chart here. And let's just see, because maybe there's some more upside left out of BTC. So this correlation, really since last April, it's been pretty tightly positively correlated. But take a look at that. Maybe Bitcoin is the leader and IGV is following BTC. Maybe IGV is following BTC on the way down instead of the other way around. So if Bitcoin's already made the move to the downside, it could just be that starting next week, we see IGV roll back over and make its next move lower. That could be what we're about to see. And if that were to happen, then this horizontal that I'm going to draw in would be the level of support for software. But it would also be, how many tests have we seen so far? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's too many. The more times you see a level of support or resistance tested, the more likely it becomes that level breaks. My expectation here is that we see software break this level during the correction out of the S&P and the Nasdaq. Now, let's say that that happens, okay? Let just for the sake of argument, let's say that that happens. Let me go ahead and remove that horizontal. Where would the next level of support be? Well, let's go ahead and anchor it to those March 2020 lows and just extend to the right. There's the next higher low. And you could buy software down here at 65. That would be an interesting level to buy. Wait for the break of the horizontal right there. On the break of the horizontal, then or you could even honestly, like, this is probably, you just initiate the short first thing on Monday, like initiate the short first thing Monday morning, and just play it down to this level of support down here. So that would be a pretty interesting trade, actually. Maybe rather than just trading the basket, the ETF, IGV, you could just get short individual names like Microsoft. So Microsoft, and you could trade this out of your DeFi wallet on Ostium too. That's actually not a bad idea. Getting short some of these equities into next week. So Microsoft, if it ends up breaking and really closing below this false breakdown low that it put in, just earlier this past week, we go ahead and fix that trend line there. So I think that the horizontal would be the next level of support for MSFT, right there. This horizontal, 345. So if that were to be tested, 345 is 15% the downside. So yeah, maybe not enough meat on the bone without leverage, and I don't want to use leverage. So I'll probably pass on a trade on Microsoft. Oracle has been so beaten down that if this horizontal were to fail, it would probably move first to this trend line support here. Let me just go ahead and highlight this trend line support. If this were to fail, then we would see 117, 118 get tested on the downside. If you just measure how far is that, another 22%. So maybe 22% is worth it on Ostium. I don't know if you can trade Oracle there though. Just an idea. Okay, so we took a look at software a little bit. We took a look at Bitcoin, ETH, and Sol. We looked at the S&P, the Nasdaq, volatility, and crude. Let's take a look at some of the shitters. How about SUI, SUI? And notice the same pattern that we see on all of these alts, the bear flag. So painted a flag down here. And my expectation is 36 cents for SUI at a bare minimum. It probably ends up moving lower. So I'm going to go ahead and just drag this down a little bit. Start buying at 36 cents because I think SUI could have a bright future. Really fast, really cheap chain. Maybe it's used for something. So I'd be willing to, allocate a tiny portion to SUI just, to be able to get a really good entry and maybe play for a bounce next year. So I'd be holding this one for like 18, 24 months, waiting for the next bull. But 20 cents on the downside, that'd be awesome. I could pick it up for 10 cents, even better. So I'm just waiting for an opportunity to buy some SUI, and I am short in the meantime. XRP. Here's XRP. Let's take a look. This is everyone's favorite. Definitely my favorite right here on the short side anyway. So I think XRP down at 75 cents. That's the first stop on the downside. And so that would be, an additional 45% to the downside from where it's currently trading. But I don't think that's where it stops. I expect it to move all the way down to its bear market lows from last cycle, 30 cents at least on the downside for XRP. And, we'll see what happens about Ripple Labs. But, that looks like it doesn't smell right. Something doesn't smell right about Ripple Labs. Let's take a look at Arbitrum. No reason for this token to exist. I expect it to move down to like 2 cents, maybe an additional 80% on the downside out of ARB. Aave. Let's take a look at Aave. Really useful protocol, but with all those governance wars that Aave is going through right now, and it doesn't even need governance wars to sell off. This is just an altcoin. So buying an alt is not the same as buying shares of stock in a company. I expect Aave, along with all other digital assets for the most part, 99 out of 100 of them, I expect them to move down to their bear market lows from last cycle. So for Aave, that's going to come in down here at like $50. And I would actually buy some Aave at $50. Although you might even get a better opportunity to buy Aave below $50, but I wouldn't start buying it until 50. Let's take a look at BNB. So, Binance is just not it's a bad actor. Like Binance is a bad actor in the space. And so, this is a bear flag. And if or when this trend line support breaks, I expect just the floodgates to open on the downside for this thing and for it to move all the way down to $200 and probably straight down too. This is just so volatile and manipulated in a bunch of different ways. So I'm short BNB, and this is a beautiful bear flag. Beautiful bear flag. Found support at the trend line support, and now it's just a matter of time until we see that next leg down. So I'm going to remain short BNB. Arrow. This is one of those scam incentive tokens for one of those VE33 dexes. And what they did is they used a really complex DEX mechanic scheme in order to bootstrap TVL. And it's basically a scam. So I think Arrow probably breaks down below 33 cents and moves straight down to 13 cents. There's really no value for this token whatsoever. And, I'm hopeful that holders will be able to exit their positions before you just see massive value destruction, because there's no reason even for this to hold 10 cents. Like, this is a token like Black that should be trading for a penny or less than a penny, like a fraction of a penny. So yeah, my expectation is 33 cents breaks and we move straight down to 13 cents and then spend the rest of the year just finding a low, maybe sub 5 cents, something like that. I am short Arrow, and this is the only position where I'm really paying funding right now. But I'm happy to continue paying funding because, hey, it's moving lower. I'm profitable. Let's take a look at Fartcoin. Okay, Fartcoin is a meme. Great meme, funny while it lasted, but still a meme coin. And unless you're going to be able to do something with this, aside from just watch your bags lose US dollar value, this thing's going to zero. It really is. So this level that it's currently trading above 14 cents, my expectation is that when that breaks, we get a retest of this level here. Let me just go ahead and drag this down like so. So that is 7.9 cents, 8 cents. So 50% on the downside, like maybe even next week. That makes sense to me. I am short Fartcoin. Okay, let's move on to Tau, BitTensor Tau. So BitTensor Tau, even though this is I would say probably a higher quality altcoin than the vast majority of altcoins out there, especially the layer ones. I think that this is just a better idea. This is a better project than most of the other just random layer ones that exist for no reason. Like SUI. Really, what does SUI exist for? Okay, you use a new programming language, but so what? Even Solana, super centralized, it goes down. I heard them bragging about, hey, we haven't gone down in 2 years. It's okay, great. I remember what it was like when I had assets on Solana and I couldn't do anything because your entire network was down for 4 hours in 2024. I remember that. So, but BitTensor Tau is a cool project. It really is. It seems as though it's trying to generate economic value from AI outputs. So if I'm being completely honest, the subnets look like businesses, but I really don't understand the tokenomics of BitTensor Tau. All I know is that the chart looks like shit. That's all I know. I would be a buyer of Tau down here at $50 though. $40, $50, something like that. I would definitely be a buyer of Tau. And I would just hold it spot, and see what happens. Because if it were to recover from 50 back up to its all-time highs at 750, hey, you do really, really well. Hold a small bag of Tau, maybe a couple $1,000s, and just do nothing. That's basically the plan. This bear cycle is get short the items that I have the greatest conviction in being short, and then watch everything else, sit on cash, wait for capitulation, wait for depression, buy only the alts and Bitcoin. Number one, just buying as much Bitcoin as I can possibly get my hands on. But also, I'd like to have some moon bags. And the only time when you can actually pick up moon bags is at the depth of the bear market. Like you don't buy moon bags, a year into the bull. That's not how this works. Like you need to be buying when everyone else is, shitting bricks and their hair's lit on fire because they're down 99.9% and they finally hit that pain threshold and were forced to sell, and that marks the bottom. That's when you want to be buying. And so I'm just waiting. I'm just waiting for an opportunity to pick up Tau at like $40 or $50. I think that'd be awesome because I bet this one survives, and maybe I'll even buy a subnet. That would be so cool. I bet that there's actually real stuff you can do with one of those BitTensor Tau subnets. I'd rename it DeFi University and do something with it. That would be awesome. Probably pick one of those up for nothing this year. So here is Tron. This is literally the only altcoin with a big market cap that hasn't given all of its gains back. I can't think of another altcoin with a really big market cap. Yes, Bitcoin, its bear market trough last cycle was like 15K. And Bitcoin is, definitely well above 15K. But so is Tron. So, Bitcoin, Tron, they're like, two of the only tokens to really have held on to their gains. But this is, again, it's just another high volatility altcoin. So if it breaks this level at 27 cents, then I think it moves down to 17 cents. This is like no man's land, MML, no man's land, because there's no support down here. It's just you got the horizontal support, you lose that, and then 17 cents is the next support. So, but that's only 40% to the downside from where it's trading. So compared to all of the other digital assets, it could be that Tron just outperforms by moving to the downside by a smaller percentage amount. That could be what happens. Here's AVAX. Now, AVAX is one of the real underperformers. So if you really want to see something interesting, let's just see this. AVAX in Tron terms. Of course, straight down, straight down. So, and just all-time low after all-time low. Let's take a look at AVAX in US dollar terms now. So the one thing that's different about AVAX from most other altcoins is that it has already put in a low that is lower than its bear market low from last cycle. So that is really bad news for AVAX. That tells me that it likely goes down this bear market this year to $3 or so. So I would actually buy some AVAX at $3, but not at $9. So, I'll buy it 60% lower. I've got no position in AVAX, and I'm just waiting. Alrighty, you guys. I appreciate all of you for joining this call live. I just want to go ahead and share the school community with everyone just real quick. So this is DeFi University, and it is school.com/DeFi University. And I go live in here twice a day for an hour each day, or for 2 hours each day. And I also put together some phenomenal research. In the classroom section, I put together a bunch of free courses on beginner DeFi concepts, building an investor mindset, providing concentrated liquidity, trading perpetual futures, and operating on DeFi money markets. So as well as a bunch of DeFi protocol deep dives, I also offer private coaching. I've coached hundreds, literally over like 400 clients and no joke, I think 25 or 30 countries over the last, basically this entire cycle. This is where I spend the majority of my time. So if you're serious about building a DeFi skill set or building a crypto skill set or just becoming a better investor or trader, check out DeFi University at school.com/DeFi University. Thanks everyone for joining live. I appreciate you all and have a great weekend. I will see you guys next week on Monday. Bye-bye now.